Saturday's scene in Milwaukee, Josh Hader's first appearance for the Brewers since the All-Star reliever's racist, misogynistic, and homophobic teenage tweet surfaced last Tuesday. And how was he received? Not with mere applause or cheers, but with a standing ovation. Now, FYI, on Friday, Hader made a tearful apology to his teammates, and those same teammates were in the interview room with Hader as he met with the media. Hader also met with baseball's VP for Social Responsibility and Inclusion, Billy Beane, for more than 2 hours. Tim, how do Brewers fans look? Was the standing ovation the next day, was that inappropriate to you?
Oh, I don't think it was called for. I do understand it happening, and I don't know if I hope this so much or if I think this is true, but here's what I think is that their applause for him, they're not applauding the things he tweeted about when he was 17. It's more their disdain for the media and for the gotcha journalism type things that they see that we treat everybody with. Oh, you're a big star, you're an all-star now? Well, let's see what you tweeted 7 years ago in high school. Oh, here it is. Let's put this out there. And on top of that, you saw that photo, that video. He's got his African-American teammates standing in support of him. That makes it a lot easier for fans to say, those tweets weren't a big deal. I'm glad he's back. I'm going to cheer for him. Doesn't mean it's right.
KB, when you do a standing ovation, you're making a statement of some kind. What do you think Brewers fans were saying with the standing ovation?
Well, what they said to me was that it's actually worse what they were doing than what Hader actually did as a 17-year-old. That was a one-time event for that individual, and they seemed to be endorsing that behavior and attacking those who would expose it and expect some sort of punishment for Hader. It also underscored for me what a lot of people have felt about Milwaukee in terms of how they feel about people of color. That city has one of the worst records in this country when it comes to education, when it comes to incarceration, when it comes to housing, when it comes to the division of people of any city in this country. And I think they just put it on really poor display the other night.
Frank?
You know, I think what Tim was talking about, when you see his teammates standing back there, I think there is a sense among the fans, oh, okay, the players are okay with it. So are his African-American teammates. They're willing to show forgiveness. We're going to do that. I definitely think that's part of it. And I also believe it's one of these things where it kind of turns into it's the media versus the player, and we're going to respond. We're supporting the player, not the media, for trying to go after some kid looking for tweets from years ago. I think that certainly plays into it. But I think we're a society when you see the players, his teammates standing there, it's like, hey, wait a second. That's our guy. So we're going to support him because everyone's attacking him. I think that's what a majority of the people were thinking when they stand up and cheer.
How'd you see it, Bill?
Frank, it's one thing to support, to say you're forgiving him. It's another thing to enable him and endorse him the way they did. Shame on you, Milwaukee. Seriously, shame on you. And Frank, yes, they saw his teammates were standing behind him. His teammates weren't cheering. They weren't applauding. They were just standing behind him. And if you don't want to boo him, fine. But to give a standing ovation to that sort of behavior is to endorse, again, that sort of behavior. And I can imagine how his African-American teammates felt listening to that. I can imagine how anybody in the stands of color or a gay person in the stands felt listening to them giving a standing ovation to someone who, as a 17-year-old, basically an adult, tweeted out those thoughts. It was, again, Milwaukee, I think they were sending a different kind of message here. And the message that I got, and I know a lot of the country got, is that, you know what, this is not all bad.
Bill, you mentioned that you're 17 years old, basically an adult. 17 is not that young. I said the same thing.
No, it's unbelievable.
KB, how much of this comes down to where you come down on that very issue, whether or not somebody who was 17 should actually be held responsible? That should be reflective of who they are. If you think he was 17, it was no big deal, move on. Maybe you're more apt to defend him than if you are more offended by these comments, even though it was 7 years ago.
You can't just move on. You know, the Southern Poverty Leadership Center did a study of social media at around the time of Obama's second election. And what they found among the most heinous of these tweets was most of them came from people who were, guess what, in high school, around 17 years of age, just like Josh Hader was. And you see now how that has what effect that has had on societies as we move forward and the situation that we're in now in this country. And so you've got to nip this stuff in the bud right now. And that's why I hope that Josh Hader goes back to his high school just outside of Baltimore after the season and explains to those kids what he did and why it was wrong and why it was so hurtful.
Tim?
I don't disagree with anything KB said, and you could even unfortunately add Sterling Brown and his situation into that mix when you're discussing Milwaukee. I would say this. All of us are on Twitter. All of us spend at some point way too much time on Twitter. Most people are not on Twitter. Most of those fans are not on Twitter. Half of them never read what he wrote. They've heard the story about it, and they're still, like Frank and I have said, it's really the media against the player, and they're viewing it in that lens. I don't think most of them are standing in support of what he said. At least I hope not.
Well,
I was about to say.
That's the way it looked. That's how it looked.
It's the optics of it. It's the standing. It's one thing to applaud. It's one thing to support your player. It's the standing.
But that's what fans do. The players are standing behind them, so the fans are okay. All right, now we're supposed to stand up and clap. It's almost like they're getting.
Well, Frank, I'll just say this. Maybe the fans are also taking their cues from the team, because you have Brett Phillips, one of his longest tenured teammates, saying, "Our goal is to win a World Series. If we're going to do that, we need Josh Hader." Maybe the fans, this might be about baseball for them, saying, you know what? This is a guy with a 2.0 record, a 1.44 ERA. I'm saying fans are forgiving, especially when it's your guy. That's how they typically are. And I don't know why we come to expect anything different from them at this point. They're not very thoughtful, a lot of these things. I'm with you, Bill. I'm just saying they're not very thoughtful in general.